later on. Let's go back to George Stephanopoulos for the next round of questions.
I want to ask about another issue that's been dominating the headlines the last several weeks, and of course that is the scare over Ebola. We saw Governor Hassan announce this week that those coming back from African countries should self-quarantine for 21 days, and that the state has the authority to enforce it. Just next door in Maine, we're seeing a standoff between Governor LePage and Casey Hickox, the nurse, who says that she doesn't want to abide by the quarantine, but he says that he will exercise, quote, the full extent of his authority to enforce the quarantine. Presumably that means going to court. Senator Shaheen, do you think that's a good move?
Well, people are understandably concerned about the threat of Ebola. This is a new disease. We've seen some missteps by the CDC from the Dallas hospital. And I think asking people who have been to West Africa, who have been in contact with Ebola patients, to do a voluntary in-home quarantine makes sense. And in fact, the governors do have the authority to enforce this kind of a quarantine to ensure the safety of their residents, and I think that's important to do. Hopefully they can work this out so that they don't have to arrest anybody or put anybody in jail, because this seems like they should be able to get to a reasonable solution. But again, just like the issues around the border with immigration, the issues around ISIS, the issues with Ebola, my opponent has been using the concern that people have and really fear-mongering that concern for his own political purposes. A leader should be serious, should alert people to what's going on with issues, but not try and grandstand on them.
Let me move on to Senator Brown, but let me just pin you down on something. If you're saying that you believe the governor should have the authority to enforce it.
No, I said I believe they do have the authority.
So then it's not really a voluntary quarantine, right?
Well, hopefully people will be willing to voluntarily do it, but if they don't, then the governors have the authority to enforce it. You know, I was a governor. I worked after September 11th with the threat of anthrax, the threat of bioterrorism. I think we have to understand that governors need to protect the health and safety of their residents, and so this is another case where they have the authority to do that.
Senator Brown, you've spoken out on this as well, but how do you respond to the points that Casey Hickox and others have made that having a quarantine for someone who is asymptomatic simply doesn't follow science?
George, let me tell you my position on this very important issue. First of all, I want to start out by saying, thank goodness we have troops and people who actually want to go to those infected areas. They're heroes. The military, Chuck Hagel, has said our soldiers, when they come back, are going to be mandatorily quarantined. Yet the president says it needs to be voluntary. Here's the problem. There's so many inconsistencies and confusion with not only the CDC. Remember, the CDC head was in front of Congress saying, we need some good ideas. They said that a nurse who was infected could actually fly when she called the CDC. So the problem is that we don't have a clear and concise policy. The experts are confused. We need to have a mandatory travel ban. It's a no-brainer. It's common sense. It's not fear-mongering. We need to make sure that we have a mandatory quarantine, because we saw in New York, 300 miles away, that somebody was out going to a restaurant, bowling, and on the subway when he was infected. So I think that I would argue that the governor absolutely has the ability to enforce that law, and I believe that the woman in Maine is. We need to put public safety ahead of personal inconvenience, and that's basic common sense.
Well, as I said, I think the governor does have that authority. But if my opponent were so concerned about the CDC and about this issue, then it's disappointing to see that when he was in the Senate, he voted for a Republican budget that slashed funding for both the CDC and the National Institutes of Health. These are serious issues. We need people to come together with serious solutions to address them.
What's the answer?
Yeah, this isn't a money issue. This is a common sense issue. You don't need more money to tell people what they need to do. We want the president to succeed. But we also want clear and concise information as to what we're going to do, what's expected of us, and how we can help. It's not about money, Senator. It's about actually having clarity. And initially you were opposed to a travel ban. Then apparently you were in favor of a travel ban. And now you want to rely on the experts for the travel ban. You're waffling on this issue. We need to get this disease in its infancy. The president said it would not be here. We've had one person die, 3 others infected. If we act now together, we can actually stop this in its infancy, and that's what I'm proposing.
Well, we don't address a disease like Ebola with common sense. We address it with the support of medical experts. That's what I've advocated. I've said I've been open to travel restrictions as long as they're workable. I think in the case of in-home quarantines, they're workable, and the governors have that authority. But the fact is, if we're going to address diseases like this, we do need the research. We do need to support the CDC and NIH in what they're doing. And there are those who argue that if we had supported that funding, we would be much further along in addressing a disease like Ebola by now. And so it's disappointing that my opponent talks about this issue, but he doesn't want to do the hard work to address it.
Josh, back